from the historic Ham Building in St. Paul, it's the Haberdasher's Couch. I'm Kendrick, inviting you to the show, starring Heimie and Dorset, featuring Todd Walker, also featuring Amy Charlo. And now, ladies and gentlemen, here's Heimie.
Happy Friday, everyone. Welcome to another show, the Haberdasher's Couch. We don't have to pay somebody to listen to you. And I tell you, we are in the gun library today because it is befitting of the guest that I have on the show. Ross came on a few months ago, and we covered The Boys of the Brule. If you don't have that book, check it out on our website. It's a wonderful book talking about the Brule River and actually him growing up in the Brule River. He's grown up in many places, right?
Yeah.
In his book, Growing Up in Minneapolis and Minnetonka, a city, a lake, and a family. And wow, what a family. So what's interesting is that this chronicles your childhood and your family. But so is it true? Is the Abraham Lincoln portion of this William? Was it William that came off?
Yes, he emigrated from England.
Yeah.
He bugged out on his apprenticeship with a machinist. Wanted to carve his own path, and landed in Boston. Walked up the hill to the sound of the church bells tolling for the fallen president Abraham Lincoln, and that was his first introduction to the United States.
Your family, how did they eventually make it to Minnesota?
My great-grandfather, William Fruen, stayed in Boston for a year or two and used his machinist education as an entree to a company that manufactured screws. And he made, being an inventor, budding inventor, he developed many ways to improve their production, whatever, eventually becoming a partnership with the original owners.
Right.
And when the company was sold, he had heard about the burgeoning community around the Mississippi River, and set up shop there. And he was very adept at seizing opportunity when he saw it, and he combined that with his drive and his intelligence. And when the big mill explosion on the Mississippi River happened, he took advantage of the situation and invented a couple of safety measures for the mills and the grindstones. When the grain flow got low, it would stop and would avoid the meeting of the millstones, which sparked, and grain dust is extremely volatile, and that's what causes fires.
Wow. But then he found water.
He was an anomaly because he did not settle on the Mississippi. Of course, all the milling took place on the river because of the power of the falls.
Right.
And he moved west to the far fringes of Minneapolis, which were not wilderness, but certainly not settled, and settled on Bassett's Creek, which he used to power his screw manufacturing. And somebody bought him out. He agreed not to indulge in any screw manufacturing or consulting for 3 years. And during that time, he was really sort of not adrift, but not a real specific purpose. And he was digging, and he came upon a spring with wonderful water, and he turned that company into Glenwood Inglewood bottled water. And
if you were ever blessed in a lifetime to have that many things show up, I mean, not that he didn't work for it, but he was aware. But isn't that just, it's such an interesting saga.
always in the right place at the right time.
Right.
I grew up in a house in southwest Minneapolis, basically between Minnehaha Creek, which was a block and a half away, and Diamond Lake, which was another block and a half away to the east, and to the to the south, and to the east was Lake 𝐶𝐚𝐿, and to the west was Lake Harriet. The Minnehaha Creek, which seems a lot smaller now, when I'm a grown man, was our personal Amazon. We build little forts with discarded pieces of wood or soggy cardboard. We would take our boat models that we assembled, and when we're done with them, we would put a few firecrackers in them, and and a little lighter fluid in the hull of the little plastic boat, and set the firecrackers on fire and push the toy boat downstream. And of course there would be a conflagration, but that was the idea. And
Kids were just left.
Yes.
You know, kids are very rarely left without their parents nowadays.
My great-grandfather, as you know, came over from England, and my great-grandmother, they arrived in Illinois after escaping religious persecution. In Sweden, the official state church was Lutheran, and my ancestors were Swedish Baptists. And sometimes in religion it goes a little too far, and the state church would kidnap Baptist children, baptize them in the Lutheran church. There was violence and whatever, so they escaped that. And my great-grandfather discovered the same kind of situation in Illinois. It was a Swedish community, but they had the same schisms.
Sure.
So he set out up the Mississippi River and took a left at the Minnesota River and stopped at Carver Landing, which is right near Waconia today. And he was walking to this beautiful lake called Minnetonka, took a wrong turn, and ended up on the shores of a lake which he called Clearwater Lake, which is now Lake Waconia. So he founded a community there called Scandia, which no longer exists. It was never incorporated, but it was a home for Swedish Baptists, and there were some other nationalities there. But his first home there was under a tree with blankets draped over the branches to shelter him. So he went back to Illinois to pick up his family, found out that his mother and oldest daughter had died from, I think it was diphtheria maybe, and so like they did back then, he just re-upped, found a new wife, and she had 2 daughters, and they all came up to Carver on Lake Waconia, Scandia actually, and they settled in the midst of the Minnetonka Dakota hunting grounds. When they did not have a village by Lake Waconia, but they had one south of the river, and they were somewhat migratory depending on the season. But when the smaller mammals were hunted and used for nourishment, they would cross the river, and so there was a lot of interaction. And it worked out okay at the time. But as many people know, Civil War came along. The government sort of lost interest in anything that was outside of the Civil War, and the Dakota went to the agencies along the Minnesota River, and were told there was no money for them or no food.
Many times, yeah.
And so that's what got them incited to start the, you want to call it the Dakota War, the Sioux Uprising, whatever it was, and turned into the largest mass hanging in U.S. history.
How did you end up compiling such a great chronology of history?
There, I thought there was a story there, and my family never throws anything away, and so we have documents from the 1500s on up, letters, and so I gleaned a lot of information from those sources, and then of course there's the oral history from my family, and I tried to tie it together, even though you know, the book could have been 500 pages, but nobody would have been able to pick it up, much less read it.
Give me just something, just kind of like a through line to end the show today of picking up the book and reading it. What's the through line? Is it family, friends? Is it, what is it?
Two things. My grandparents had the foresight and the means to purchase a Crown Point on Big Island, which is obviously the biggest island on Lake Minnetonka, and it was back when they purchased it right when the crash came, and the Dust Bowl years came. So the shoreline of their nice piece of property ended up, you know, going out about 30 yards and all sorts of debris and such, but it came back. But to me, the interesting thing, was being able to have breakfast at home in Minneapolis, and in 45 minutes, drive to the place where we parked our cars, took our boat to Big Island, and we were sitting there on the dock of a cabin on an island, you know, 40 minutes from our house. And to me, that, looking back, is crazy, but when you're a kid, that's all you know.
Does anything still exist?
Yeah.
I mean, if you were to, you know how it's really strange how you'll be in the boundary waters and the milepost that you went past as a kid is the same milepost.
Yeah, yeah.
Are there still some mileposts for you?
Oh, yeah.
That trigger, that emotional attachment, you know? Well, a dock, a sign.
Yes. There's so many things. I mean, it is rarely the case when I come to town. I don't live in the Twin Cities all year long anymore. But I invariably will go and see Minnetonka Falls. I will take a boat ride on the lake and go past the island, which we still own part of.
So all I have to say is that there's so much to talk about that if you get an opportunity to get a copy, and you can call us at the store, and we should actually see if we can stock these.
Sure.
And pick up the Boys of the Brule here while you're here, but make sure that you take this. I have it alongside my bed, and I pick it up and I read it, and it allows me to go away for a while.
Yes.
And I really appreciate that, and I appreciate you coming on the show today.
Well, you're very welcome. I wrote the book in chapters that are mostly standalone, so you can read it like you do, and read a chapter, put it down. A couple weeks later, read another one. So you don't really, advise reading it chronologically, but it is something that if there's a lot of wheat milling in there, and if you're not fascinated with wheat milling, at least as part of the it's part of the fabric of Minneapolis and St. Paul.
Without a doubt.
Yeah.
Ross, thanks for coming on the show. Thanks for joining us today, and we will see you next week.